Support for this episode comes from the University of San Francisco's SWIG program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice, better known as JSSJ. The JSSJ graduate level certificate program in JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, is more than an educational program. It's a call to action to improve the future of every Jewish institution. Our classes meet the moment with supportive learning that helps navigate an evolving and challenging Jewish community landscape. Bring these invaluable skills, tools, and resources to your organization. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis. Apply by January 12th to get in on spring classes before they begin. Just head to usfca.edu/JEDI.
This is Judaism Unbound, episode 406, Talmud TikTok. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dan Liebenson.
And I'm Lex Rofberg.
And we hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and that this episode can be a little bit of a dessert. Perhaps think of it as pecan pie, my favorite. So today we are continuing our series of episodes exploring digital Judaism. And our guest today is Miriam Anzovin, who is someone that is probably familiar to a lot of folks who spend some of their time on TikTok and some of their time on Jewish stuff. TikTok's algorithm tends to figure that out and probably has presented you with many of Miriam Anzovin's videos, in particular from her Daf Reactions project, where she posts short reaction videos to the page of Talmud that is studied internationally as part of Daf Yomi, the cycle in which over 7.5 years, the entire Talmud is read one page at a time. Before we jump in, just a reminder that our mini courses for the Yeshiva are coming up in just a few days. And I wanted to pass the mic to Lex, who is much more inside of these classes than I am. So Lex, what can you tell us about this new crop of shorter classes that are going to be available as part of the Yeshiva?
Yes, I am so excited about these mini courses and happy to take you into the excitement because in just 2 days from when we're releasing this episode, so this is Friday, November 24th as we release this episode, beginning in 2 days on Sunday, November 26th, 2023, we have mini courses starting. We have one that will be Sundays. All of these are 3 weeks, so one session per week, 3 total sessions. We are going to have one that's called Jewish Witches, Finding Them in History, Becoming One Today. We have on Mondays, Developing a Demon, Ashmedai Through the Ages with Olivia Dvorak-Tucker. Check out their recent episode with us about their class. We have on Tuesdays, The Gods Are Furious Anger in Kabbalah with Nathaniel Berman, a returning teacher. Also, Jericho Vincent is a returning teacher. We have on Wednesdays, Rude, Lewd, and Fabulous, 21st Century Jewish Feminist Comedy From Haddish to Glazer to Bloom with Jonathan Bramfman, who recently had a bonus episode you can listen to learn more about that class. And last but not least, we have Hanukkah as Elemental Magic, Igniting Ancient Mythologies for Modern Observances. That will be on Thursdays for the next 3 weeks. So it is now the time to register. If you've been saying, yeah, I'll go to the website, I'll click the link. Now you really have to, so that you don't miss the first class, judaismunbound.com/classes. That's where you sign up for any of these amazing classes. You're not going to regret it. If you're looking to give an early Hanukkah present to somebody in your life, maybe get them a gift. That is a chance to take one of these 5 courses. And Dan, back to you.
So now let's introduce our guest today. Miriam Anzovin is a visual artist, writer, content creator, and, as she puts it, massive Jewish nerd, who explores the juxtaposition of pop culture, nerd culture, and Jewish culture. Some of her short-form video series include, as I just talked about, hashtag Daf Reactions, also hashtag Parsha Reactions, hashtag Jewish Holiday Reactions, hashtag Jewish Book Reactions. So that's a lot of reactions, and also hashtag A Very Jewish Makeup Tutorial, and the Elder Millennials of Zion skits. Miriam Anzovin produces a lot more content on Jewish themes and ideas. In a sense, she's really pioneering a new genre of Jewish experiences. As Miriam Anzovin describes the hashtag Daf Reactions series, she shares her practice of daily study of the Babylonian Talmud from the viewpoint of a formerly Orthodox, now secular, millennial feminist. The videos are her authentic reactions, with commentary both heartfelt and comedic, putting ancient discourse in direct communication with modern internet culture, pop culture, and current events. Miriam Anzovin was the very first artist in residence at Moishe House, and she was previously the host of the Vibe of the Tribe podcast. As she puts it, Miriam Anzovin exists at the intersection of Safaria and Sephora. To find out more about Miriam Anzovin, including her art portfolio, check out www.miriamanzovin.com, and you can follow her at Miriam Anzovin on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, and Blue Sky. Miriam Anzovin, welcome to Judaism Unbound. It's so great to have you.
Shalom, friends. I'm delighted to be here.
So I thought it would be interesting to get started with trying to think back to the Miriam Anzovin of, let's say, 3 years ago. And I wanted to start off by getting a little bit of an understanding from you on, what level of Talmud scholarship had you already manifested when you began Daf Reactions?
Oh, the Miriam of 3 years ago. So young, so naive, so completely devoid of any Talmudic learning whatsoever. I will say that even though I had a fairly good Jewish education, as things are considered, I went to a Lubavitch day school. That's a day school of the Chabad Lubavitch Jewish movement. I went there for several years. I have my degree in Judaic studies. None of that really contained any Talmud study whatsoever. Doing Daf Yomi, the study of the Talmud at the rate of 1 page per day over the course of 7.5 years, the project that I'm doing right now, this is my first go-round with the Talmud.
I also started the Daf Yomi cycle with my wife 3.5 years ago, where we just recently passed the midway point, so that's exciting.
I know, it is very exciting. It's almost hard to believe it has been that long, and yet it has also felt like an eternity at the same time. I wonder if you have that same feeling, like it's both so fast and so very slow.
Well, I was thinking maybe we should have had my wife on this episode because I think it would be interesting to have her compare notes with you, because I think that her reaction has been a lot of surprise about what she's finding in the Talmud, which is that she thought that it was going to be a lot of wisdom stories, a lot of kind of Rabbi so-and-so met Rabbi so-and-so and they, met a fox on the road and they had a conversation about, birds or whatever, and it would all be metaphors. But actually, a lot of it is just kind of this, I call it junk DNA. It's just kind of like a lot of filler material. I'm sure it's doing really important work, but it's a lot of it. And really those stories or that really powerful stuff feels like you have to wade through a lot to get there. So I'm wondering, you do these 3-minute videos and there's a way of kind of boiling things down that way. But I'm wondering if you could reflect bigger picture as you've experienced reading the Talmud essentially for the first time for the last 3 years. What would be your big picture reflections?
I didn't think I understood that it is stream of consciousness, but stream of many consciousnesses. And that, I think, is the primary shift in my thinking about it. It's not narrative. It's not linear. It's circular. It's all intertextual, where knowledge is assumed of every other part of the Talmud. Conversations are repeated in different contexts with different outcomes. When I launched into this, I knew a little bit about the Talmud because I had that Jewish education background, but I hadn't really dug into it. So anything that I had been told was just like you say, it was a story. It was agadah, the storytelling aspects of what is in the Talmud. It wasn't halacha, Jewish law. It was the stories. I learned rapidly, let's say, at the beginning with my chavruta, who knew even less than I. We were both walking in completely unaware of what we were about to encounter. And now I can look back and say, oh, there's all these elements, all these ingredients that make up what the Talmud is, that are added over a long period of time, mixed together. And sometimes it makes sense. And sometimes you're like, I have no idea what's happening. Where did I find myself? Where am I? What time is it? Who am I? It's all a complex mishmash at times. And then at other times, it makes total sense. And you never know what you're going to get.
So how do you describe your role in this world? A lot of people, a lot of our listeners who have no background in Talmud, for example, or other elements of Judaism, would feel very reluctant to do something that was public facing. They would say, oh, I have to learn for many years or I'll never really get there. But you kind of walked in there and started learning, and pretty quickly we're doing a public facing thing. I'm curious how you describe the public facing thing that you do. Is it teaching? Is it something else? And how did you kind of move from starting to be exposed to this thing to very quickly turning it around and inviting others into that process?
So I describe my work and what I do. I serve as a gateway drug to further Jewish learning. People come to my content, my brief, short form video content, as you say. Usually it's about 3 to 5 minutes, never longer than 10 minutes, because that's the length of time you get on TikTok to post a video. And I want people to discover my stuff, not see me as a teacher, because I'm not a teacher. I'm a nerd. I'm a massive Jewish nerd. I'm amped about this. I'm excited about this. Sometimes I'm annoyed by it. And I want people to come along this journey with me, to have these crazy, wild Talmudic stories and experiences that I'm having. And one of the joys of this work has been that people actually have, either through following me on social media and watching it as I do it, but also taking on the daf themselves. Daf Yomi, the news cycle, began on January 5th of 2020. And at the time, I was working at the local Jewish Federation, CJP in Boston, and I was hosting a podcast with my chavruta, my study partner, funnily enough, and we would get to work early in the morning. He and I are both people who begin to work at 8 a.m. That's when our brains are functioning, and then they do not work after 3. And we would learn the daf together, and we would react to it and talk about it in the way that we would talk about anything we were excited about, whether it was, what had happened previously on a TV show we loved, or real events in our lives, or pop culture, or any of that. We would just talk about it in the same way. And I would bring in those different references to use as we try to explain the daf to each other, which is the process of learning with a chavruta. You wrestle with a text and try to work it out between each other and figure out what is going on. So I had been doing this learning. I had been doing Daf Yomi for almost 2 years, actually, before I ever recorded a Daf Reactions video on TikTok. So I had been lurking on TikTok like a lot of people during the pandemic, right? Because after March 2020, we were no longer learning in person. We had to do everything remote, working remote, learning remote. And it was really great that there were so many online resources. Sefaria.org, all online. Where would I be without Sefaria? Nowhere, that's where. The Hadran podcast every single day, because I don't actually speak Aramaic. So that was a great thing to have as a resource that I could listen to as I was reading the text and studying the actual text. And that was wonderful. And then for all that time, I had been lurking on TikTok. I had been doing Daf Yomi, coming to a place in my Jewish level of excitement where I'm like, I want to talk about this more. I did a podcast episode with my chavruta and 2 rabbis on it, in which I gave over for the first time a daf that I found particularly over the top, shall we say. And it is Shabbat 110. So from Tractate Shabbat, page 110, each page of Talmud has 2 sides, and you learn both A and B. And it was quite a story. It was quite out there. And I remember giving it over in the way that I speak about anything, with some swears, with some pop culture references. And I looked up and the 2 rabbis were crying, laughing. They were crying, laughing. And I thought, maybe I have something here. But it wasn't until the podcast, unfortunately, was canceled and I had all this Jewish energy and nowhere to put it that I ended up deciding, I'm just going to make TikToks. I'm going to put this on TikTok. And I don't care if nobody sees it. At least I'll have this expression of my Jewish self in a creative format. So when we're talking about becoming a forward-facing person who does Talmud online publicly, that was never a thought that crossed my mind that we would get to this point right now.
So I think there's a huge misconception in the Jewish institutional world about what the youth want and what I did some fun air quotes there for everyone, but what is actually interesting to people. And I think it's both wrong and destructive. And for a while, it seems like people thought that the things people wanted are things we'd call culture. I identify as a cultural Jew, which is sometimes weird for people to hear from somebody who is a rabbi. But people use it as cultural, but not religious. I'm both. I think religion and culture are totally intertwined. But for a long time, there were these organizations that they thought that the ways to get Jews to want to do Jewish things were to give social events that don't have too much Jewish content. They'd want to run away from like Jewish content, quote unquote, like Judaism, Talmud. Like that's not what the youth want. They want to hang out and they want to drink and they want to meet people their age and maybe be with them romantically. Like that was sort of the avenue for a while. When people actually the last bunch of years, not just you, but many others, all of a sudden have been like, whoa, Talmud explosion. Let's talk about Jewish mysticism. I mean, when we offer a Jewish mysticism course in the Onion Sheet, like everybody arises from the ether to take these classes. Like that's actually what people want. And I think what it boils down to is for many people, I'm not going to speak across the board. What's fun about Jewish is that it's weird. It's not that it's like everything else. It's that it's very weird. And that when you open up the Talmud, you've got on one page a really long esoteric, I mean, it's not esoteric, it's like fun and back, but like really long debate about some very specific thing about what makes X, Y, or Z pure or not. Then you've got a demon visiting in the bathroom. Then you've got like a talking animal every once in a while. Like you've got just a random spur. I like stream of consciousnesses or streams of consciousness. That's nice. All of that's in play. And I think people are looking around and they're like, it seems like the youth, again, quote unquote, like that. And from my perspective, all you did, I mean, it's not that I don't want to dismiss what you did, but you created an avenue for people to access the weird in an approachable way. I think the fact that you didn't have Talmud learning as like a deep part of your resume, the fact that you weren't a rabbi, I think that is crucial to your success. I don't think that's like a happenstance. I think that if I or somebody else who have rabbinic ordination were to start a thing like that, could we do it? Maybe. But I think the fact that you both aren't a rabbi, and for problematic reasons that you don't look like what people think a rabbi looks like, that's why it works. Rabbis have TikTok. Rabbis have social, and like when they talk about Talmud most of the time, I think there is this defense mechanism. There is this like, I'm supposed to make this text good to people, and so I'm going to apologize for it. That's not what you're doing. So I guess I'd love to hear more from you about the tone you bring, the informality, the fact that you come into this not as, expert.
You're entirely correct that if I was a rabbi, this would not work. It works because I'm not. It works because I'm a normal person who does not have any affiliation with any denomination or organization that would tell me what to say, and I am saying it. I am saying the authentic things that come into my mind as I'm learning the text. I am wrestling with it, the really difficult parts, and I can tell you there are parts that are excruciating. There's also hilarious parts that are so ridiculous that I think sometimes there's an urge among some in the Jewish community to shield those off because we don't want people to think this is silly, this is funny, this is something we shouldn't take seriously. So the fact that sometimes I don't take it seriously is part of the problematic nature for some people about my material, but also the reason why it appeals to other people, because I don't try to apologize for the difficult stuff we encounter in the Talmud. And we're going to encounter difficult stuff because it's a group of men talking, 2000, 1800 years ago. We're not going to agree with everything that was said then. In fact, they didn't even always agree with everything that each other said. There's hundreds of voices over hundreds of years, and some of those voices are irreverent. I think of Bar Kapara, who was a sage but did not ever become a rabbi because he was too ridiculous. And he did too many things that were considered over the top. I'm thinking particularly about a story where he's at a wedding and he defaces the chuppah in order to get invited to the wedding. He literally writes on it. And then at the actual wedding, he insults the family who is getting married. And basically just walks out of there having insulted everybody because that's how he rolls. And I think this is the approach that has felt reasonable and normal and relatable to a lot of people who have encountered my content. I am going about this for the very first time, so I'm not trying to tell anybody what to believe. What they choose to feel and think about those same texts is their choice and comes directly from their own experiences of life, their own reference points that pop to their mind. For me, it's often, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, those are the Marvel movies. Those things automatically populate my brain because that's what's in there anyway. But for other people, there will be other reference points that they immediately connect to when they study Talmud for the first time. And they will be like, oh, this is just like, for example, today's daf deals entirely with a guy who tries to betroth multiple sisters, but can't tell which one he betrothed, the oldest or the youngest. And my mind was like, Pride and Prejudice. So often, we as Jewish community people have missed the mark when it comes to what is appealing to, again, air quotes, young Jews. And I say this being an elder millennial, so I'm not that young. I'm an elder millennial, elder millennial of Zion. But I am where we are already. I was on TikTok, so I created for TikTok. That's where the community existed. So I didn't have to go and try to get people to attend an event or come and hear a speaker or whatever type of activity a more established Jewish organization might try to push on the younger Jewish community to get them involved. I don't have to try and do that. I am already where we are.
So that's a really important set of points. You know, I try to be from the rabbi side, like hashtag not like other rabbis. I feel like we're trying to do similar things as elder millennials, or I don't know if I'm elder millennial or mid millennial, somewhere in there. And I'm on TikTok very regularly, but through curation that my wife lovingly does. She likes lots of videos, and then each day our daf yomi is sitting with random TikToks and scrolling through them. And I'm up on a lot of trends on TikTok. Trends being like a term of art, not just like I'm saying I'm trending.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
So I had a post that I did do on Facebook about that Roman Empire trend, and I tied it to the Talmud actually, because I was like, the Talmud thinks about the Roman Empire like every other page.
All the time. All the time.
But what I wanted to consider or think about with you, I am super on board pretty much every word you've said so far, but where I'm maybe not is that you called yourself a gateway drug to other things. I think that you might be cocaine or heroin, like not a gateway to another one, but itself the drug.
I'm not weed.
I don't want to slander you, but I don't think that, at least I don't think you exclusively or maybe even primarily are like serving as an entryway from which people then do a different Talmudic or Jewish thing. I'm thrilled that people are, but I'm not saying that to dismiss what you're doing. I think that there are a lot of people for whom you are the thing. And
that's true.
I want to celebrate that. And part of where my passion comes from on this is that for years, I mean, going back to 2015 when I first started working with Dan, I've been like advocating for digital Judaism. And for a long time, it itself, the whole beast that is the internet, it has been seen as a gateway drug to Judaism that lives not on the internet. And I don't think that's true descriptively. I think that a lot of people inhabit digital Jewish space as their primary community more than their offline place that they live. I include myself in that, even as I love the Jewish community in Providence. And I think that prescriptively, we need to say that that's good. Like, it's actually great that a community, that a space that is accessible to way more people than any singular local Jewish community with a longitude and a latitude. Like, it is great that that place is so popular and has people like you who are serving as, I'm going to say it's rebbes. I'm not going to call you a rabbi, but I do think you are serving a function that is comparable to what a good rabbi does, which is to help people learn and connect to Jewish things. But I think you're the heroine. And I'm saying that as a pun. I haven't had the chance to use heroin, the drug, and heroin, the like hero word as synonymous. So I'm playing with that. But I want to sit with how, like, what about the people for whom you actually are it? You're the Talmud to them. They're not doing daf yomi. They're not going somewhere else. I would argue, like, not only are they like set, not only is that okay, I kind of like that better in some ways than people who would be interfacing with you and other notions of Talmud that are more bogged down in traditionalism. So, like, what of the people for whom you are their stop? You're cocaine or heroin, not a gateway drug.
Don't get me wrong. I love those people. I love them absolutely. They don't have to go anywhere else if they don't want to. They can just hang out with me. That's fine. What I will say is that sometimes people will do things like message me, or they'll leave a comment like, oh, I just am scrolling through TikTok on the toilet, but then I consider your videos Torah study, so I have to shut TikTok because you're not supposed to learn Torah on the toilet. And I'm like, thank you so much.
That's a take that's bad. We should learn Torah on the toilet.
Thank you. I definitely have edited. One time I had food poisoning and I was vomiting while editing. So I think everybody, it's fine. It's really fine. If I was doing that, it's totally cool if you happen to be watching the videos in the bathroom. Some people definitely view my videos as all the Talmud content they want and all the Talmud content they're going to seek out. And that is okay with me. I don't want people to think that it's exactly the same as doing Daf Yomi, because in each video, I can't really touch upon everything that is discussed, nor can I do a video every single day because it's like 8 hours to produce a video of 3 minutes, and it's longer if the video is longer. It's a lot. It takes a lot. I just want them to have the experience of discovering what it is that we're doing in this journey. If they choose to go along on their own, I am delighted. If they want to just hang around and watch me talk about it and share my own feelings, and this is the way they connect to Talmud, that's also wonderful, and I'm honored. And I know a lot of people have told me that. They have said, I never would in a million years would study Talmud, but I'll watch you. Or they'll say, I never in a million years would have thought I could study Talmud, but then I watched you, and then I knew that I could too. Both of those things are valid to me. I think in a lot of ways, when you say I serve a function of a rabbi, I do feel responsibility towards the people who watch my content. It's a congregation of sorts, a very different type of congregation, 100%.
I said the function of a good rabbi. I think many rabbis are serving functions that I, as a rabbi, struggle with.
Yeah, but there are times when I feel I have to address something. It might be something that's happening in the world, and I need to talk about it. And I will connect that in some way to what I'm learning in the Talmud. For example, last year, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I made a video that was really, not too secretly, a rant about that situation, but I framed the video as a discussion about demons, which is something that I love to talk about in the Talmud. I want to have commentary that is relevant and also is authentic to me, because really, I started this for me so that I could internalize the material better, so I could connect to it better. Because when you explain it back out, then it sticks in your brain. That's why a lot of the stuff I've talked about in video sticks, but some of the earlier stuff may not have stuck as well, because I don't have to engage with it on that same level as you do when you're creating something out of it. You're creating a piece of art, an art project out of it, essentially. But there are things in the Talmud that if we have come across it and it's really horrible, I will have to address it. Not because I want to talk about that, but because I feel a responsibility to the people who watch my content. And I will try to provide, yes, context, but not apology. And also what we can do in the present, because I can't go back and change time, unfortunately. Talmud is time travel in so many ways, but not in a way that I can actually change what happened. What can I do in the present to make change? If there is something that has come down from the Talmudic era, 2000, 1800 years ago, that still has negative ramifications on life today for Jewish people. I think, of course, about agunot, agunot are women who are chained to dead marriages. Their husband has not granted them a get, a Jewish divorce, and so they're stuck. And they can never move on. They can never remarry. They're really screwed. And I think about the origins of that in the Talmud and how it is still a problem today and how it has not been fixed. I have to talk about unpleasant things that if you Google Talmud, you will come across online just anti-Semitic content. And it's the worst parts of the Talmud, which we have to remember. The Gemara, which is one of the two main sections of Talmud that comprise Talmud, the Mishnah, which is the oral Torah, and the Gemara, which is the comment section on the Mishnah, is like many comment sections in that some of it is great and some of it is trash. That's just the facts. So you're going to come across stuff that you were like, what the actual fuck? That's a normal response. What the actual fuck is a normal response to encountering those things. So, for example, last year there was a daf discussing child marriage, very young child marriage, and it is not great to learn about that. Even if we say, oh, this was in the past, it's still hard to encounter that and difficult to encounter that. So what I did is I talked about that was painful. And then I made a donation to an organization that works with Jewish survivors of childhood sexual assault. I can't change what happened then. I can only try to change what happens now. And that is in a lot of ways triggered by the uncomfortable parts of the Talmud that I end up discussing because I feel an obligation to. Because if people are coming along with me on this journey, I can't just show them the positives. I have to show them the stuff I really, really struggle with, or else it would not be real.
So I want to think about like the digital element of some of what you're talking about, because I want to go back to a point in the conversation where you talked about, one might say, the digital lineage that you are a follower of, because you talked about Sefaria, right? None of this could have been possible without Sefaria, which for folks who don't know is an online repository of all the Jewish texts, many of which are in translation.
For free.
And our episode of the podcast with Brett Loxbizer, the founder, is in the show notes. Head to our website.
And you talked about Hadran, which is a podcast run by an Orthodox woman in Israel, Michelle Farber, who is also putting out this information digitally. And what's interesting is I'm thinking about the old days of Sefaria when it first started, and they thought that what was going to happen was that it was going to be this kind of mass translation project, that all kinds of people were going to be translating, and that was kind of the way that they thought the digital element would work. And over time, they realized, like, no, actually, it would be better to buy actual translations done by experts and not necessarily crowdsource the translations. But in doing that, that would make a tool available to people that they would be able to use. And so then Sefaria started to say, no, actually, it's our source sheet creator, which is going to be the real breakthrough, the way that people are going to use the sources. So the point is that people don't always know what the digital tool is going to unleash. And one of the pieces that, as you've been talking, I've been thinking about is just how what you're doing is opening up possibilities for other people. And we've raise this question, what are they going to do? Some people are going to use it as a gateway drug. For some people, it is the drug. But I am thinking about, in a way, for the last 1,000 years, the rabbinic industrial complex, so to speak, has papered over certain possibilities that are in the Talmud that people don't know about. And so at a certain point, you say, they are choosing not to do that. Now, there's nothing that I can do about that. Right? I am sad about that. I wish that the Orthodox world would use the tools that they themselves have access to in the Talmud. But what I would say is that outside of the Orthodox world, it would be good if we started to grab hold of the Talmud and said, actually, the Agunah problem shouldn't exist anymore, that the Talmud gives us those tools. Now, we as non-rabbis, as non-Orthodox people, can actually just read the Talmud, which was, by the way, not possible until a few years ago because the digital translation wasn't available. So I guess what I'm asking is, now that you start to think for yourself, I mean, I think at this point it's less about speculating for your audience because we'll see what happens with your audience. But I'm curious about yourself. How have you felt differently empowered over the last 3 years in just being exposed to the Talmud in its rawest form and being able to say, actually, there are things that I've been taught over the years that I don't have to look at that way anymore? What I'm asking about is basically whether we as non-Orthodox people who are reading the Talmud directly, something that would have been unavailable to us even a decade ago, functionally. Look, I want to say to my Orthodox friends, hey, I actually read the Talmud, and I think the thing that you're telling me that Judaism is all about or that Judaism requires is actually not there. And that's because for 1,000 years or 1,500 years, I would say after the Talmud, actually, there was I don't want to call it a conspiracy, because I don't think it was nefarious.
But calcification, let's say.
A calcification, and even maybe like an intentional calcification. Like what I'm saying is that I think there are things in the Talmud that are scary to certain people, that make it hard to have a society be controlled. And that the way to make that stuff not get out is to basically not allow people to read the text. and to instead tell them that the text has to be mediated through these quote experts.
Especially as women. Whenever I do a workshop, and I go around doing workshops, not about how to learn Talmud, because I'm not authorized to teach that, but how to react to Talmud I can do. So I go around to these different communities and we look at some Talmud together and react to it together. And one of the things I ask people to think about and just keep in mind is who has a voice, who is being talked about, but actually does not get a voice. And I often think how lucky I am to live in an age where women and people who aren't men can access the Talmud. No one can stop me now. It's too late. And we can actually see what's in there. We can wrestle with these ideas. Nobody can say to me, oh, well, it's here it says blah, blah, blah. And that's how it is, how it's always been. And that's agreed to by everybody, because I can go and look myself. And I know that that discussion is far more nuanced and complex than they are letting on, or they want people to know. But they don't like when I know that. They don't like when we know that, because then we take power back. And a lot of people don't like it when their own power, their own authority is taken away from them by people who hitherto were kept out for very clear, obvious reasons of patriarchy. So I consider it a great gift that I am able to learn this material and be able to come to terms with it on my own and be able to say to somebody that's inaccurate, or you're not showing the entire conversation and debate that's going on here, or you're only taking this particular opinion and only discussing that because it agrees with the message you want us to understand. But it's not the only message that's in there. That's the beauty of the Talmud, and also why it's 7.5 years to learn it. So I consider it of immeasurable value that these translations are available online to everybody for free on Sefaria. I could not afford a full set of the Talmud, nor do I have the shelf space, sadly, for that. I sometimes wish I had a physical copy too, but that's okay. I don't really need it in order to do this learning. I can do it on my phone. I can do it at my computer. It is everywhere that I am, which is also where my content can be found. Anywhere with an internet connection, you can find it. I can't imagine what my life would be like if these tools were unavailable to me. It would certainly bear no resemblance to the life I currently am living.
So I'm feeling called because Dan and Miriam, you're both Dafers of the Yomi, Daf Yomers. You're both people who are following this practice daily, doing Talmud. I want to call out that I am not. The not is not just like, oh, that's a thing that I'm not doing in my life. Like I'm actively, it's not something that calls to me as a practice. And also, I want to celebrate and honor that, like, the Talmud, I think, excites me less than it does the two of you. And I'm saying that not because I want to yuck your yum, but because I want to yum the yum of listeners who are also in my space. Because I think sometimes there's this tendency where people assume, like, if you don't like the Talmud, it's probably because you haven't seen it. You probably think it's X, Y, or Z, but you don't know that there's cool stories about demons. You don't know that it's very informal and there's all this interesting stuff about like random sex and like fun argument. Like, I do know it's that, and it's still not my favorite genre of Jewish text. And also, like, one of my favorite genres is Mishnah, which you mentioned. It's like the much more contained, smaller version that still, if you did one page a day, it would take you a long time to get through. And I'm saying that because I want it to be clear that the magic here for me is not that you are specifically sort of enlivening the Talmud and giving people the tools to connect with that text, but rather that you have chosen a Jewish text, in your case, the Talmud, and have approached it in an informal, I mean, I don't want to say informal, like it is informal. You speak colloquially, you speak approachably, but what I've been saying informal, and I'm realizing like you do it consciously and thoughtfully. It's not just like totally coming out your ass. And I actually think that's not just like, oh, it happens to be that speaking informally works for people. Like there are certain things that need to be said in a tone that is crass and clearer as a result of the crassness. And as an example, I'd say you talked about how you found some, broader issues in contemporary society and you've responded to them even when they're not precisely on that day's Talmud page. For me, the most important moment of your DAF reactions. I've watched many videos, but like the video that for me as a human being was most important was when there was this rabbi who said, he was giving a different TikTok and you responded to it. He said, if you care about the Jewish people, or if you care about Judaism, you wouldn't even be considering intermarriage. And you responded, and you started it out. I'll never forget it. This to me is, I've spent a lot of my life in conversations about intermarriage with very articulate, lovely, thoughtful people, and even folks that are speaking in favor of more empowerment of interfaith families. They don't say things like you did, which we need, which are, ew, that's gross. Ew, that's gross. Anybody out there who speaks to a room of people about intermarriage, you can write lovely paragraphs about it would be good for the Jewish future if we stop creating if we stop gatekeeping, and if we empower, and we need to stop being so misguided. And like, you could craft lovely prose to talk about intermarriage and to try and do so in a way that empowers people like me who are in an interfaith relationship. Or you could say to your room of people, that guy was gross. We need to say stuff like that. And I think some of the alienation that people feel in Jewish institutional spaces is like, even when there's good stuff to say, we say it in this rabbi voice. We say it in front of a microphone and big old like lectern on an elevated platform. And even when you articulate something nice, there's a way in which that just sort of like floats into the air and sort of calmly enters your ears. More, that's gross. More of that. So, like,
no, I want to punch people in the face with what I say. I think that that's vital. Why are we dancing around trying to protect somebody's feelings when that rabbi didn't give a shit about anyone's feelings who was the child of an interfaith family or not Jewish and was in love with somebody who is? Everything that was said in that initial video by that rabbi, and by the way, that got he took it down because everyone came down on him really hard, as they should. This is the nature of TikTok. It is not friendly. Mm-hmm. If you piss everybody off, they're going to tell you. He, after the fact, sent me a message being like, well, I made one in a nicer tone and my wife loves your videos. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I didn't reply to him because he doesn't matter. What matters is negating this narrative that Jewish marriage, two Jews getting married is going to work out beautifully. I was married once to a Jewish person, ended terribly, okay? So this whole idea like, oh, if you marry a fellow Jew, it's going to be a wonderful marriage, this is what it's intended, and you clearly don't care about Judaism if you're not married to a fellow Jew. That's ridiculous. And what I mentioned in that video was the research of Dr. Karen McGinnity, who... That
episode's in the show notes too, folks. Brett Loxbizer, Karen McGinnity. Check them out. Show notes.
She's amazing. I interviewed her on the podcast I once hosted. She's great. And she does all this research debunking these myths about intermarriage, about, oh, we're hyperventilating about the end of Jewishness as we know it. People have been hyperventilating about that since, the beginning. And the thing that pushes people away is when they are shoved away by the Jewish community. Why on earth would we be so worried about the loss of Jewish identity, and yet we are here perpetuating it by treating intermarried families so horrifically? That's on us. That's on the Jewish community to rectify. So I have no problem calling things out to their face. I would say that to that rabbi's face. I would say it to anybody's face. Because I've actually met people. And I'm like, has that rabbi never met a Jewish person or a person who is from an intermarried family who cared deeply about Judaism? They just happened to fall in love with somebody who wasn't Jewish. It can happen. I know it's a shock to people, but it happens all the time. You live in a fantasy world if you think that your rant about not getting married to somebody who wasn't Jewish, and that means you love Jewishness and the Jewish people. If you think that's going to convince people not to marry somebody who doesn't happen to be Jewish, that's not going to convince anybody of anything other than they don't want to have anything to do with that kind of Judaism.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for that. And I'm torn because, again, this comes to my relationship to the Talmud. And we've talked about this on the show a million times, but it's worth revisiting. one way to articulate a powerful statement for, like, in this case, the empowerment of Jews in interfaith relationships or the empowerment of interfaith families more generally, one way to do that, and you actually, to my knowledge, didn't quite do this in the video. One way would be to, like, find something in the Talmud or something in the Torah that you can read in a way that is expansive and like, oh, this anchor text from thousands of years ago can be read as accepting on intermarriage. I do that sometimes. I taught a class on yeshiva called Moses, Tzipporah, and Us, and it was very much a by and for people in interfaith relationships class. And I told the story in the Torah that is not usually told this way, but there's a story in the Torah where a core character in the Torah is punished by God when they speak out against an interfaith relationship. Miriam says that she doesn't like Moses' relationship with a Cushite woman.
Not me. For anyone listening,
yes, true. Sorry, I need to clarify my Miriams. We have many good Miriams in our orbit. Miriam Turlinchamp is starting as our executive director. But Miriam in the Torah, she says, Moses is in a relationship. He's been married for a while at this point, actually. But she brings up a Cushite woman. It's either Tzipporah or it's not. Go to the show notes for more on that confusion. But God strikes Miriam with skin disease. Now, Aaron also seems to have been upset by this relationship, and Aaron gets no punishment at all. There's some
Aaron gets away with a lot.
There's some not so subtle misogyny here. But there's literally a deoraita, which means like a from the Torah moment where somebody gets punished for saying an interfaith relationship or interethnic or whatever we want to call it relationship is bad. Is that a stretch? Kind of. Like I don't think that's the original intent of the text, but it's there. And the reason I bring that up is because part of me gets nervous when we do the strategy that Dan advocated and that I think you are also advocating of. So you think agunah is an unsolvable problem? There's actually stuff in the Talmud to solve it, because there are some things that there really isn't much stuff in the Torah and Talmud. And intermarriage, for me, like, that is often a place I can find more stuff in Torah that's helpful there than I can in Talmud. And so I guess part of my question is, like, you responded to this gross guy not by anchoring on the Talmud, even though that's actually most of what your TikToks are. You said, here's an amazing teacher, Karen McGinnity, who, by the way, love to Karen. I'm sure she's listening, and she's a teacher of mine. Interfaith Families Jewish Engagement Program at Hebrew College. May it rest in power. But you said, I'm going to respond by citing somebody now and not the Talmud, because we can't always rely on that. So what's the give and take there of, like, kind of granting the Talmud some power by centering a lot of our progressive pushes on it, while at the same time noticing, like, it might not always be able to be useful for that purpose?
Yeah, I think this is a case where I looked at the other videos that have been made in response and the other comments that have been made in response already, because the TikTok environment is quite different from Instagram or YouTube or anything like that. Responses are made in video form all the time, and they go back quite akin to the Gemara in many ways, which is something that I really enjoy about it. That's how the discussion goes. But there had been a lot of videos that had already been created by other Jewish creators responding to that guy. And they had responded in a number of different ways. And there were many rabbis who had done so. And I'm like, okay, they have all said things that I respect. What can I add? My own voice. I don't necessarily need to approach it from a text-based place, although usually I do when I talk about a lot of things, but it wasn't required because other people had tackled that already. What is my place in this sort of ecosystem of criticism? Well, I was going to take it personal. And immediately when I had seen that video, the immediate connection, and I always try to pay attention to my immediate response. If I'm encountering Talmud, if I'm encountering some asshole online, what is my real gut reaction? What is my visceral reaction? And immediately I thought of Dr. McGinnity's work. And I was like, okay, that's my first response. That's what I'm going to tell everybody about. Here is a modern expert who can put into context this moment in which we now live. Because sure, we could talk about what's in the Talmud, but people would be like, well, things have changed since then and we need to be blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about research now. Let's talk about this really dangerous rhetoric about how intermarriage will cause the destruction of Judaism. That's simply not the case based on evidence. So let's look at evidence, because some people won't care about what's in the Talmud, or they won't necessarily feel it is applicable. Like some people that I know argue with you about the Miriam and Zipporah situation. Is like, oh no, it meant something else, because everything is up to interpretation, which is the beauty and the problem at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. These are sort of like the ongoing themes that have caused this crisis, the continuation crisis of Jewish identity. Like, oh God, we're all going to disappear unless we all do XYZ thing. Unless we all support this, we all marry fellow Jews, we all da-da-da-da-da, we all belong to a synagogue. These are sort of like the things that we were told will protect us, will shield us, will make sure that we continue as a people. That is not necessarily the truth. And I wanted to bring in a voice of somebody who could speak to that on a really deep academic way that I could not, but I could refer people to.
What I'm curious for you is this question, in a way, Lex and I have talked about the way of thinking about the digital revolution as a migration to a new land. Think about the way that the Jews of Europe came to America, and that there were no Jewish institutions in America. And so the way to be Jewish in America was invented. And I'm curious about this new digital land that we are, I think we are on one of the earlier ships to this new land. Or we're starting to try to imagine, well, what is this world going to look like? And so I'm curious if you could reflect a little bit on a future that excites you, that you can maybe see the edges of from your vantage point. Like, what are some of the ways that we might be having different conversations in the future because thinking about what it is to be Jewish has changed profoundly?
Yes. I love the fact that my Jewish community is online. That's where it is. I don't have a physical Jewish community that I can go to. They're all around the world. They exist on my phone, but they live all around the world. And I love that because I am then exposed to their different experiences, their different ways of practicing Judaism that vary from place to place and person to person and situation to situation, and what diasporic community you happen to be in. And also helps me not only get to know my fellow Jews, but see the rest of the world and how it is and learn from that as well. So it opens up so much that we would have never known before about how other human beings live unless we happen to come into actual contact with them on a daily basis. And I think that's a truly beautiful thing. I also think this is a democratizing community in which knowledge isn't held by one person or one finite group of people. It's not held just by men. It's not held just by the Orthodox. It's not held just by people who went to yeshiva. This is a community where anybody can have authority because it's all about personal encounters with the text. It's empowering in so many ways. Being able to have community when I truly didn't think that after I had left Orthodoxy, I would ever have a place in the Jewish people again. I didn't see that. I didn't know how I would achieve it. I didn't know if it was right. I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I couldn't practice Judaism in the way I had done growing up, right? I wasn't observant of the mitzvot, of the commandments anymore. I didn't keep Shabbat, the Sabbath. I didn't keep kosher. I wasn't doing any of that anymore. And so I thought I had to give it all up. I didn't see how I could exist without going to a synagogue, which I wasn't going to do. So what made me Jewish? I was working at Jewish nonprofits because I had to do something with that degree. And that was working at Jewish nonprofits. But it didn't really give me a sense of being in Jewish community, no matter how much those nonprofits talked about it, being in community with each other. It didn't mean anything to me. It only started meaning something when Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory came and talked about Daf Yomi. And in that moment, mind blown, I'm doing a mind blown movement for people who are listening on the podcast. I never, until that moment, had thought, there is a place for me. It's through learning. It's not necessarily through this way that I've been raised to be Jewish. There was another path. There was another path for me, and I could go on it and be on the same path as all these Jews around the world who were doing the same exact thing. And now I feel like I have a community. Anyone, anywhere, can be part of this community. And that's what I want to see more of as time progresses, as time goes on. I want to see more communities like this that aren't necessarily divided, segmented by this is what young people look at, this is what people of this generation look at. This is what this denomination looks at. People watch my videos and participate in discussions underneath the videos from all types of age groups, many different genders, a lot of different geographic locations. And I find that beautiful and heartening. It's not just one type of person. The beauty of that connects to the beauty of the Talmud. There are so many voices in the Talmud. The Talmud is better because of all of those voices. And I believe the same is true here. Judaism is better with all of these voices. But really what's most interesting to me is that I'm sharing my own views and my own love of a topic. I love Judaism, even though I'm an atheist. Yes, I am. Even though I have struggled with belief, as so many of us do. I love it so very much. I find it fascinating. I find it riveting, even in its, maybe particularly in its challenges. And so I bring that love to what I create. I am a nerd. I'm a giant nerd for Judaism. This is just the fact of it. In the Talmud, for example, who are these real people? Our intellectual ancestors? How did they come to terms with figuring out Judaism in a completely new world, which is exactly what they had to do with what happened after the Roman Empire, boo hiss. They had to figure out what Judaism would be going forward. And I feel like we're in a similar moment in many ways, not a Roman Empire-based similar moment, but a moment where we are figuring out what Judaism will be, how we will carry it forth, what ways that will manifest for us. And I think there's so many things that we can learn from that.
I mentioned earlier the combination 1-2 punch, informal or at least like not fancy highfalutin on the one hand. And I didn't quite mention the other side, which is like, to me, part of what makes for strong digital presence, Jewishly or otherwise, which is having that informality, having the fact that you talk like a person, you're not in rabbi voice, combined with, as we talk right now and we can see each other, you have a very nice backdrop with cool art. You have a pretty high level mic that you use for your videos. You have, I mean, I don't know what equipment you use, but like the sense I get is that it's real production value. And
it's just my phone.
Like it's your phone combined with, you sit in a similar formation. You sit in a similar setup for most of your videos. You have like a brand that you have committed to. And I think that often there seems to be an inability to combine those two elements. People either make these very expensive, long form, whether it's a podcast, whether it's videos, whatever, like that take months upon months to make. And then they're like gorgeous, but you can't keep doing those on a day by day or week by week basis. Or people just, in a way that is much less than, they just hop in front of their phone with terrible lighting and no good mic. And they might say something great, but it doesn't really reach anyone. And the other last piece I want to mention is the only other thing of this interview that I slightly disagree with you about, which is you said at one point, I'm not authorized to teach Talmud. I am authorized to do reactions. You say, I might not be getting the exact phrase. I don't think I should have this power, but if I do, as a rabbi, like, you're good. You're authorized. Like, teach Talmud. I'm like in real time recruiting you to teach in the Onion Yeshiva if you want to. I'm doing it partially as like a bit, but also not just for you. I'm not just like being nice that I think you're a good teacher. Like, I think it is a massive systemic problem that people who are able to speak to human beings, to be engaging with them, think that they are not authorized. Like, it's so bad. The people who like have been authorized, often it's people who it correlates with a certain sensibility and orientation to Jewish text. Even if you come in with some like cynicism and some willingness to upend, if you go to rabbinical school for a bunch of years, like, you do gain some of that, even if you don't want to. So like, I guess as we close, I'm looking to combine, like, how do you go about the practicals of blending informal with really high production value? And how might people like you who do that actually be precisely the kinds of people who should be authorized in Jewish spaces to teach and lead and etc.?
Let me first speak to the production value piece of this and why the videos look the way they do. When I started doing this, I had been lurking on TikTok, as I said, and a lot of the great things about TikTok is its informality. People can have riveting things to say and they're laying in bed and you're seeing them with their face mask and, zit cream on or whatever. And I love that. My mistake at the beginning was also blending this with a sort of beauty influencer, beauty tutorial, and I'm using sarcastic quotation marks because that was the content that I enjoy. I really love watching makeup tutorials. I have a series, a very Jewish makeup tutorial on my channel where I talk about Jewish things while doing my makeup, combining two of my great loves. I didn't know I was locking myself into this certain aesthetic and this certain way of presenting myself, but I was. And then people came to associate that with me, and then accidentally I discovered I'd made a brand. I'm not going to say that it is easy to keep up this level of production by myself. It is very difficult. Very difficult. Having a personal life is a hilarious joke. Each part of it is an art piece in a way, because I'm an artist. I'm a writer. That's all these pieces that listeners can't see behind me, but they're all art of merch that I've done or illustrations that pertain to the Talmud.
They can see them in the show notes again on our website, which you should go to and you should check them out and support Miriam.
Yes, these are all pieces of art that I've created, and I view the videos as art too. So just like I'm a perfectionist in the world of drawing a face, right? I am the same thing in the world of video content. And I was the same way when I produced a podcast. It was all about perfectionism. Is that always healthy? No. But has it been an effective method of gaining people's attention on this content? For sure. I care about the beauty aesthetic because I just love makeup. I love it. I've always loved it. It's like drawing just on your face. And sometimes I will tie in the theme of the makeup to the theme of the content that I'm talking about. For example, when I did Jonah reactions, I did it with like pearls glued to my eyelashes. So it's thematically a whole. It's a holistic artistic piece. Making something that I would want to see if I was the viewer. And I would be so into this. And if nobody else is, at the end of the day, I still am. The part about me not being authorized, shall we say, to teach Talmud, that's myself not authorizing myself. Nobody else can tell me that I'm not. I mean, sure, they have told me perfectly well that I'm not. So I can be a hype woman for Talmud. That's really what I am. I'm a hype woman. I don't see myself as being able to teach it simply because I have not finished it yet. And it's not linear. So I have not mastered the material enough for myself to rely on what I have learned. I need to learn more. At the end of this, sure, but I haven't gotten there yet. And it's also okay because I would rather be a fellow learner walking alongside with people on this journey than somebody attempting to lead people. I don't need to do that. They're already with me.
Wonderful that you can mark your calendar for 3.5 years from now or so when you'll get an email from me then recruiting you to teach in the Onion Yeshiva.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks so much to all of you out there for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and we hope that you'll tune in to the rest of our episodes in this digital Judaism unit of ours. We've got a whole bunch more coming up in the next bunch of weeks, so don't miss them. The other thing not to miss? The Onion Yeshiva mini courses. We plugged them at the top. I was super excited then. I have not lost any of my excitement in the last hour. You definitely need to take one of these mini courses. Go to judaismunbound.com/classes. Jericho Vincent, Nathaniel Berman, Jonathan Branfman, Olivia Devorah Tucker, Sarah Chandler. Such amazing, gifted teachers. You want to take their classes. You can learn more by heading to our website, going to the classes page, registering now, because they do start in just a couple days. There's financial aid available to anybody who needs it. Just click on the form that is available on each of the different registration pages, and we hope that you'll take it. So the other thing we, of course, want to do as we close the episode is that we want to encourage you to be in touch with us, which you can do in a wide variety of ways. First, you can head to our Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram pages. All of those are at Judaism Unbound. Second, you can go to our website, judaismunbound.com, to check out show notes for this episode, other resources, sign up for Apocryphest, our amazing Hanukkah initiative that's coming up soon, all that good stuff at judaismunbound.com. You can also email us at dan@judaismunbound.com or lex@judaismunbound.com. We deeply appreciate hearing any of your thoughts, visions, questions, ideas, All of that is super amazing. And we are really grateful if you are able to support us financially, which you can do via judaismunbound.com/donate on either a monthly recurring basis or just as a one-time gift. So thank you all so much for listening. And the last thing we'd say is that, of course, support for this episode of Judaism Unbound comes from the Ashman Family JCC in Palo Alto, California, whose vision is to be the architects of the Jewish future. The Ashman Family JCC empowers you to experience Jewish paths toward a life of joy, purpose, and meaning through innovative Jewish learning and wellness programs, community building, and initiatives to develop the next generation of Jewish leaders. Learn more at www.paloaltojcc.org. And with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.